of my presentation. I used to be a Rotarian. Many of you may know that. I joined the Tuesday, I think it was Tuesdays, the morning group, 7:30 in the morning, and that was really great until I had children. And I got the obligation to take them to school, which starts at 8, so 7:30 just wasn't going to work. So then I transferred to the noon Rotary, which is you guys. I recognize some of your faces. And then the job just progressed, and if anything is going to go wrong during the week, it's Friday at noon. And I don't mean that like sarcastically, like I'm out playing golf, because you guys are here, so you'd see that. But I just didn't have the time to come to the meetings. But I really do appreciate all that you do for the community and what you represent and stand for. So thank you for letting me come here and talk. So I did come from Syracuse in 1994. My objective was to come here to go to Southern Vermont College and get a criminal justice degree. The captain of the Sheriff's Department at the time came and talked with our Criminal Justice Association at the college, and I was kind of not really paying attention, because in New York you have to be like 20 years old or 21 years old to be a police officer. So I was just listening, and he says, all you have to do is be 18 years old and you can join. And so I thought, wow, he's like talking about me. So I signed up and went through the schooling and became a part-time police officer. And throughout my college career, I worked all different kinds of activities, including being a DARE officer in our community, which was probably one of the most rewarding things that I've done. Not so much because I liked the curriculum, but more about the involvement with the students and building those bridges and having that interaction with them. So after I graduated, I went full-time with the Sheriff's Department. Did everything from being on the DUI task force, the seatbelt task force, learned how to install car seats, which really became handy when I had twins and another little one. So and I progressed up through the ranks and performed all the functions throughout the agency. And in 2009, when Gary Forrest retired, I was named by Governor Douglas to fill out the rest of that term. Since won 3 elections, and hopefully we'll be there for many years to come. I'm also married to my wife, Jamie Bump. She is the culinary arts instructor up at the high school here at the Career Development Center, and she's responsible for why this thing is a little tight today. And we both, again, have 3 children, 9-year-old twins, which if I could recommend having children, it wouldn't be having twins. Love them dearly, but that is a challenge. And then we were crazy enough to decide to have another one after that. But I do promise you that me as a sheriff, I make much more rational decisions in the way I do things than I do at home. You guys can feel free to laugh and okay, thank you. So I thought I'd give you a little history about the department. Try not to bore you too much. Talk a little bit about how we're funded, because that really determines a lot of the functions and things that we can perform here in the community. In 1781, and if any of you are historians and I have this wrong, please feel free to, who's our historian? Ted? 1781. Who was the sheriff then? Do you know? Jonas Galusha. That name, Jonas Galusha from Shasberry, who later became governor. You went to school together, right? 1781? Okay. And to date, there have been 25 sheriffs in Bennington County. The longest serving sheriff was John Maloney. Do you know how many years? 39 years, 1947 to 86. I have no intentions of being here that long, so I don't know if you think that's a good idea or not, but many years we were housed at the Superior Court, which is located on South Street. There was a jail there. The Maloneys lived there. The family lived there. They ran that jail, and that's where they operated. In 1991, Gary Forrest had an opportunity to move to an abandoned dentist office right next to where Friendly's used to be. You know you're getting old in this town when you say, meet me at the old, what used to be there, right? So the old Friendly's, and the building that we were housed in isn't there anymore either. That's been knocked down, and now it's affordable housing for RAC. And then in 1998, we moved from there to Lincoln Street. We rented the old Central Vermont Public Service building, which was a 2-story building. It was great at the time, but we sort of outgrew that. It wasn't handicap accessible. There was 2 floors, not an elevator. So in 2014, my good friend Ted was involved. We found the old Carbone auto dealership, which was a Ford dealer. And, well, tell me the history, Ted. What else? Volkswagen dealer? Yeah, so Nissan. Okay. So We worked closely with the Carbone Auto Group. They gave us a hell of a deal on the building. We purchased the building for $175,000, the two buildings. Even the one that looks like it needs to be torn down was included, and about 6.5 acres or so. We renovated the building, gutted the whole thing, and we closed on the building in May, and we moved in about 2 weeks into August. So it was a quick turnaround, and we've been there ever since. We've actually outgrown our lobby area, so this year we're going to do some renovation in there. But that's pretty much our footprint. One of the things we did was, because we had so much room, we converted our cruisers to propane. I think you've probably heard that before. This last election season, we talked a lot about that. But we have a refueling station, which that way I can control the cost of the propane, because I can pick and choose who I buy our propane from. So I'm buying propane for like $1.04 a gallon right now. So that's a lot better than $2.79 for the gasoline. But because we had that footprint, we were able to do that. I also leased some of the land to a solar company, which provides not only income, renewable energy, but we also get 10 to 15% off of our electric bill each month. So we're saving some money there. In years past, the department didn't have any equipment. Deputies used to do transports with their own vehicles and get paid mileage and hourly rate from the state. So we've come a long way. Gary Forrest bought our first cruiser. It was a Reliant K-car. Anybody remember those? The light bar, I remember this car. I mean, it was like way in the back and wasn't operational when I started, but the light bar on the thing was like 2 feet wider than the car. And we had a couple of deputies that it was like, Hightower from Police Academy, where he should have like taken the front seat out and kind of sat in the back with the prisoner. But nonetheless, it was a challenge back then. And the reason it was a challenge, which is part of what I want to talk to you about, is the way we're funded. Anybody here have any idea how we're funded? No, it's not. Thank you for saying that, though. It is not traffic tickets. We get absolutely no revenue from that. Anybody else have any ideas? Contracts with the towns, absolutely. So our budget comes from several sources. The state of Vermont pays my salary to do, we have two mandated functions that every sheriff's department in the state has to perform. One is to serve civil process. The other is to transport prisoners. So if I wanted, we could just have maybe 5 deputies that would perform those functions, and that's it. That's all we would do. That's all we're mandated to do. Obviously, that's not what we want to be, right? We want to be bigger and provide more things to more people. So in order to do that, you have to come up with a funding source. So how we do that is contracts with different agencies, regardless of who it is. Could be towns, could be the power company, it could be the hospital for security, you name it. We actually, 4th of July, we come up here and work for the country club to help people park their cars when they're watching the fireworks. So that's pretty much how we're funded. So those two mandated functions are all we have to do. Some of the optional functions that we do is traffic control, patrol, those oversized load escorts that you see going all throughout the state of Vermont that you get stuck behind, that get really frustrated, and then I get a phone call. Those ones. We provide an investigator at the state's attorney's office, court and hospital security. We provide transports for prisoners for the PD, which is separate from our mandate, because they would technically have to do that themselves, but they hire us because we're set up to do it. We have a deputy in the Southern Vermont Drug Task Force. School resource officers, there's actually a push right now to add about 6 school resource officers throughout the county. So that may potentially be 6 full-time positions for the department, which would be really good. Governor's highway safety programs. Anybody that needs to get fingerprinted for your employment will typically come down to our office and get printed. And has anybody had to do that? So you know how small our lobby is, and that why we need to renovate that, because it's kind of tiny in there. So we do all those functions. Snowmobile, boat patrol, and ATV patrol, which a lot of the newer, younger deputies love to do that because it's kind of like what you see on TV a little bit. So that's pretty much, some of the things. I'd like to save a little bit of time to. I don't even know how much time I have, but I'd like to save a little bit of time and talk about and have some interaction and get some questions. But Christy and I went to a forum about the opioid problem here in town. And one of my comments, I don't know if it was relevant, maybe you can critique me on that, but we talked a little bit about the culture within within a police agency, because our focus was more about stigma. And I think there's a lot of stigma in law enforcement on both sides, right? So like the deputies that come, the police officers that come to your communities have a certain set of values already in their head and certain predisposed opinions about things. We really need to kind of drill down and figure out what those are. And so one of my thoughts about all of this was the culture within an agency. And I just want to talk a little bit about our philosophy and sort of how I manage that, because I think it's really important. And it's kind of hits home about a lot of the issues that you're seeing nationwide between law enforcement and community. So Stephen Covey wrote a book. It's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Is anybody familiar with that? So I tried to apply that in what we do with the agency. So the first one is to be proactive. And it talks about, and I made this joke earlier, and sorry that you got to sit through this and hear it again, but so if you think about 2 circles, right, one inside the other, it kind of looks like a donut. Okay, go ahead, laugh. Go ahead. So the outer circle is your circle of concern, all the things that you can't control but you're concerned about. That would be more of the negative reactive stuff, right? Like, I'm upset because of this is happening, I have no control. The inner circle is your circle of influence, the things that we can control, the things that we do have influence on. And so I try to teach the deputies that use that circle of influence more. Don't complain that, the press talked about you in this way. Talk about what you can do to let everybody in the community know what your message is. You can control that, right, through social media and what have you. So it's sort of like being proactive and not being cynical, because you deal with that 5% of the population 95% of the time that doesn't like you, right? And that's hard to do, to wake up every morning. And I know we've talked about some folks in the medical field that sometimes feel the same way. You see the people at their worst, and it's kind of hard to wake up every day and want to come to work and do it again. The second task was begin with the end in mind. So how many of you in here, if you had to think about how you want somebody to remember you at your funeral? It's a hard thing to think about, right? But would you be able to say all those things about yourself right now? It's a hard question to sort of reflect on. And if you don't like what you could truly honestly say about yourself, you probably need to make some changes, right? And so that's sort of a philosophy that brings us together as a community to say, hey, we're all human, right? But let's begin with the end in mind. Do you really want to be remembered at the end of your career as the police officer that was always being accused of doing X, Y, and Z? If the answer is no, then you probably need to change your actions today. So the next is putting first things first. Again, sort of trying to begin with the end in mind, but if it's worth doing right. And so my responsibility to the deputies is to try to provide them with as much of the equipment and items and things that they need to perform my expectations for the job. So we try to put first things first. Thinking win-win. This always bothers me. Like, I know we're in a competitive field as far as I work contracts. Sometimes the PD does some contracts. But if you think win-win, like, somebody doesn't have to lose for me to win, right? We can both perform similar functions and still both win. So I think having the mindset, the us against them, it's not healthy, right? How can we look good in the community and still write somebody a ticket and maybe have them say thank you at the end of it, right? That's hard to do, but it's possible. It's possible. I'm telling you got to think win-win, right? But these are the things that I try to get the deputies to think about, and we're not always successful. I'm not here trying to brag about how great we are without realizing that we're all human. We make mistakes, and there are going to be issues that need to be, ironed out. The next is synergize, thinking that the sum of the parts is greater than the whole, that we're bigger than just one agency. Excuse me. Boy, that pulled pork, I'm telling you. Shouldn't have ate anything. But to synergize and to try to think collectively, collaboratively, come together and try to say, can the Bennington Police Department, the Bennington County Sheriff's Department, and the Vermont State Police all come together and achieve common goals without being, my agency's better than yours, or your agency's better than mine, or we want to do this and you can't do that. if we're thinking customer service, like how can we best serve the community, those conversations aren't healthy when we're adversarial. So, thinking to synergize, how can we all come together to serve our communities and just be good law enforcement officers. And the final one is sort of sharpen the saw. And I relate that to not only training, but also evolving. So, how we policed societies back in the 70s is completely different than how we should be policing today. And that's not bad. Some of the changes aren't that great as far as, how it's perceived, but they're necessary. And so sharpening the saw, we really need to just be cognizant of what the expectations are from the community, how those changes are evolving, and then how can we incorporate that into how we police. So that's kind of the philosophy. I know I'm getting kind of deep here, and you may not have heard that from the other two that have been here from law enforcement, but I just thought it was important because a lot of what we do in the community, we don't do a good job at tooting our own horn and letting you know. Like, everybody sees the negatives, right? I do want to share one of the philanthropic things that we do. We started the Safe Ride program years ago in 2009, where on New Year's Eve we come and pick you up and take you home so that you won't get in a car and drive drunk. And that's been really successful. But 2 years ago we started the Secret Santa program, which was really successful. So most of the deputies donate so much money per week out of their paycheck to go into a fund, and then we go and buy presents for kids who are, not well served in the community financially. We have the schools pick some names for us, and we go out and buy them presents. So the banner covered it, but I thought it was really nice. A community member has family in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Never been there, don't know where it is. But this is the Tuesday, Wednesday, December 25th and 26th of 2018. And in here on page 20-something, it says, a Vermont County Sheriff's Department delivered holiday cheer in form of gifts instead of traffic tickets. The Bennington County Sheriff's Department set out Friday to pull over cars with minor infractions, only to hand over gifts instead of fines. So, what we're doing does resonate. And we were pretty proud that was in the Jackson Hole, Wyoming paper. So that's what I have for you today. I'd love to entertain some questions, and hopefully you're all still awake. Yes? It's awful. I have 2 students right now that are working for me part-time, just like I did when I started. And I probably have 3 or 4 graduates, not including myself, from Southern Vermont College that are still working with me who have graduated. So I don't like it. But again, it's outside of my circle of influence. So we're trying to find positive new ways to recruit people, and we just need to move along with the times. So I'm hoping maybe another college, state college maybe, will come in and maybe have a satellite campus and keep some of these programs alive. But I'm not real thrilled about it. Oh, you guys are easy. I can go home? Oh. Yes, sir. Well, I think today you're getting more and more that want to do it for the right reasons, which is good, because you're held more accountable, you're more scrutinized. I mean, you got to be crazy, quite honestly, to want to put this uniform on every day. But I think even knowing that challenge, if you still want to do that job, you're doing it for the right reason, because we don't make a whole lot of money. You don't know whether you're going to come home at night. PTSD, stress. I mean, if you went through all the statistics about your relationships, your marriage, how many are going to fail versus how many will succeed, there's really not a lot of good reasons to get into the job. So there's got to be something intrinsically in someone's mind that says, I just want to go out and help people. And so I think it helps us attract the right person for the job, which is good. Did that answer your question? I think you want to, it's not what you see on TV. It's not because you can carry a gun and thump people, right? We don't want those people involved in law enforcement. We want people who are problem solvers, who are community oriented, who care about their communities, who genuinely want to help people. And yeah, it's cool to ride in a car fast with the lights on and the siren. You still get some of those little perks, but overall, you have to want to help people, and those are the people that we want to attract. And and to be able to say, well, how can I help the community by being a human traffic cone here, directing traffic? Well, I got a dancing deputy. Any of you seen that guy? Huh? Is that great or what? I mean, I've got nothing but people commenting. I waited there for 15 minutes, and the worst day, I was late, but boy, I was laughing my butt off watching this guy dance. So, he found a way to do it. He found a way to make people's day a little better. And I'm liberal enough that, some police chiefs or sheriffs would be like, you're there, come to attention and do your job kind of thing. But I'm like, you know what? People are laughing. As long as you're not being unsafe and there's no accidents, and have at it. So. There have been some suggested lesson times, but I don't think it's really come to fruition, and I'm not really advocating or, saying one way or the other if they can or can't. But, I think those are the kinds of things that make us human, people can relate to. We're not just a jerk wearing a crazy-looking hat with a gun. We're people, and that's hopefully gives us a little credibility and people can relate. Yes? So the rescue squad has ATVs, and we have one, but the rescue squad would do a lot of the search and rescue stuff along with the Fish and Wildlife. That's called the holler in Vermont. Well, and I got to tell you that it's not like that in every part of the state. We play very well in the sandbox together, and I say that with a little bit of laughter, but it's true. I mean, the state police send us to their calls. They know our deputies are in the towns, and they'll send them. Chief Doucette calls me all the time, and we go to trainings together. Our officers train together. We try to engage in contracts together where, I don't have enough staff, he doesn't have enough staff, but again, if we synergize, we both can cover a contract. I mean, that's, again, a win-win. I mean, it's all about the philosophy, and it's, all the other leaders have really bought into that, and it's to all of our benefit, right? Because you don't want, the behind-the-scenes stuff needs to be taken care of, and we all need to be on the same page in order to effectively give you good community policing, and that's really what we've, yeah, good. Yes, it allows us to do our job much better. So, Jerry.
The legislature listens to law enforcement when it comes to gun control. How do you see legislation?
You think they listen to law enforcement, Jerry? Huh? You trying to convince me of something, or? So again, I'm sorry. What was your question?
I was wondering how you see gun controls going.
As far as do I think any of it's going to pass? So right now there's legislation about a 24-hour waiting period. I think that's probably going to pass. Would be my guess. I don't know. I don't think that will really impact us significantly on both those folks that are pro Second Amendment and those that are against it. I'm not really sure what that bill is trying to solve. Again, I think in our politics we're all too much about reactive things, like something happened, somebody was angry, and they want to try to fix it, and it's something that's outside their circle of influence, and I just don't think it's going to accomplish what it was set out to do. But I'm not in the legislature. Luckily I don't have to make those decisions, but I do believe that people are able to have guns, and I'm always encouraging people to get training before you go buy a gun. And one of the things I failed to mention was the building right next door to me that looks like it needs to be torn down. We want to turn that into an indoor shooting range for training, where we would offer not only our deputies and other law enforcement agencies a place to go in and be inside, no noise pollution, no air pollution, no, it'll be contained, but also we can open that up to the public so that people that want to familiarize themselves with guns, whether you believe in having a gun or not, they're in our community, and so you really ought to know all about them, in case you encounter one. So I'm all about training. Did that answer your question, or was I a good politician and skirt around it? Yes, sir.
Your department is Bennington County Sheriff?
Yes.
Does that limit your work to Bennington County only?
It does not. We every police officer in the state has statewide jurisdiction, so we can effectuate an arrest or any sort of enforcement activity anywhere in the state. We can also have contracts either with or within other counties, within or without the county. So, for example, I do a lot of security stuff over in the Harriman Reservoir because the Windham County Sheriff's Department didn't have the personnel to do it. We patrol the town of Somerset, which is right next to Searsburg and up in the reservoir, because the Windham County Sheriff's Department didn't have the people to do it. So, again, we work hand in hand, and but we are able to do that in other parts of the state. Yes, ma'am.
Put you on the spot, but going back to the gun control.
Sure.
The 24-hour waiting period, you're not sure that would be helpful, but what would you think about any kind of psyche valve for people?
I think the people in the experiencing mental health crises are the least served population in the state. And so anything that we can do, whether it's, I don't know that would ever fly, but I don't want people to have guns that shouldn't have guns either, right? Like, I know that that's probably not what people in uniform typically say. I think they're mostly pro-gun, which, if you think about, to give you an example, I had a New York City cop come up and do a ride along with me. This is years ago, right? Actually, when I used to still patrol things. But he couldn't believe that our gun control laws and how safe we were despite the lack of gun control. And he was also thought that we were crazy to be patrolling an area where our nearest backup was a half an hour to 45 minutes away. And I'm thinking, no, you got it wrong, dude. You're in New York City. I don't care that the other police officer's sitting next to you. You've got the more dangerous job than I do. He says, what do you mean? I said, well, you'll learn to be smart up here. He says, what do you mean? I said, well, you don't use all this stuff down here, right? These are the tools of last resort. Even though you can use them, you don't. You use these two things, this and this, to get you out of trouble. And so if you build that rapport with people, you're less likely to have to experience or use of force on people. So I think it's all a matter of perspective. But I'm not against, again, training. Mental health is a big underserved population in our community. And I'd like to see any sort of progress on both of those. Yes, sir.
I spend part of the year down in Orlando, which has had a reputation as the murder capital of the world every once in a while. And Florida's a little crazy about guns. The legislature thinks everybody should own one, shoot their neighbor, blah, blah, blah. They just passed something to allow teachers to carry guns in schools. And I'm curious what you would think about that.
Absolutely not. That's what we're here for. Hire us.
I tell people in Florida that here in Vermont, everybody has a gun and nobody shoots anybody. Whereas down in Florida, my wife and I have adopted the opinion that when we're out on the highway, no matter what somebody does, unless it's going to cause an accident, you don't blow your horn, because somebody else is liable to blow something else at you. And that's happened quite a few times.
Yeah.
Road rage, somebody gets killed.
Well, and I think we still benefit from the small community mentality, right? Like, everybody knows everybody still. There's obviously people who come in that you don't know who they are yet, but as we reach out and have groups and organizations like this, the Elks, the Eagles, the VFW, all these social clubs in our community, I think that helps build a sense of community. And I think if people know who you are or know someone that knows you, they're less likely to act out in that sort of a way. But yeah, I don't know what the answer is in Florida, and I'm glad I'm not a sheriff down there. Anything else? All right.
And I have a few guns, and I worked at scout camp and archery and riflery instructor. And the NRA was very helpful back then. They're not very helpful now. I don't know if they do anything in terms of still training people and safety and all that.
They do. You can become an NRA instructor, which is a certification how to handle and teach people how to handle firearms. So they are. I know that most people think of the NRA as a big lobbyist, and I think probably a lot of the money goes toward that end. I'm not saying that's good or bad. It's just that's the way it is. But they do offer grants and things like, for example, this range that I want to put in. There is some funding available from the NRA for that we will probably tap into. The state has some funds also for those types of things. But, guns, regardless of how you think about guns, they're in our society. And if they're going to be here, you really ought to know how to safely handle and what to do if you spot one. So I'm all about the training. Yes?
I was a school teacher for 25 years, and when the school resource officer sort of role first came into the schools, I had a really hard time seeing someone packing heat in school. But I came to really respect what the school officers, resource officers, offered in the school community. You mentioned that there's a movement to have 6 more school
So 3 in Bennington. There's already one at the middle school that the PD has. There's 3 middle schools that I believe are looking and interested. I'm not sure which ones those are. Pownell is interested, Shaftesbury, and possibly Arlington. So again, I agree. I think one of the best jobs I ever had was being a DARE officer in those schools, and it wasn't because I liked the curriculum I was teaching or any of that stuff. It was more about the connection with the kids. And I still have people today that remembered when I was there, and they're like, "Oh, you're the only one I can come and talk to." I mean, you build that relationship, and that's really important. It's about building community. But I also think you have to be careful about who you put in that position. It can't just be a warm body in the slot. It has to be the right person who can interact well with kids and just, who wants to do it, obviously. But you can put the wrong person in there and not do yourselves any favors. So,
Where's the funding come from?
so that will be through the school budgets. So your tax dollars basically through the school budget. The Bennington, the 3 of them were 3 or 4 were approved on a non-binding vote. The last school budget that passed, it was pretty significant, like 2-1, I think. So that's with the new board forming. I think they need to meet and figure out if that's the direction they want to go based on the vote. So we're still kind of waiting. We're eagerly anticipating that it'll be a yes, and we'll have some positions in the school. So we're going to work with Chief Doucette because it's going to be in his town, but don't know how many of those positions he can fill. So whatever he can't fill, we will fill, and at least in the Bennington area, we'll probably definitely have Pownell, Shaftesbury, and Arlington. Yes?
Another question, but just a thank you. Working for Head Start and Early Head Start, we have a lot of kids who have been in foster care or in dangerous situations where they've watched police officers arrest their parents, or that there's been this negative, outlook on law enforcement, and that they're scary and that they're not the community helpers that some of us grew up viewing. So the Secret Santa piece, coming to schools and letting kids, climb through your car and being in the schools is just so helpful.
And they all love the canine.
What's that?
They all love the canine. The dog, that was like the best thing we ever did.
Yeah, but like little things like that to show that this person isn't scary. This uniform doesn't mean something bad.
Yeah. Probably my biggest pet peeve in this profession is when I'll be in a restaurant in uniform. I know it rarely happens that I'm in uniform, but when it still does, and somebody will say, "There's a police officer over there, and if you don't behave, I'm going to go tell him." It's like, please don't tell. I'm the one person in the world that if your kid's having a crisis, they should be able to come up and run to me and tell me whatever is going on, and be a trusted person. So that's one of my pet peeves. But thank you for that. It's the deputies really need that positive reinforcement. And when people come up and even if it's just a simple thank you for what you do, it means the world to them. It really does. So thank you for that. All right, we're done boring you. Thank you, everyone.